Hello to all attending the first International Ocean Data Conference, online and on-site in Poland. My name is Stephanie Ronan and I'm from the Marine Institute in Ireland. This presentation is about how, at the Marine Institute in Ireland, we opened up our archive and created interactive, visual and open data from historical rare books. Since I've been working at the Marine Institute, which is quite a few years now, there's been a small and steady demand for historical data contained in two collections in our archive. I was chatting one day to Dr. Maurice Clarke from our Fisheries department, who uses the collection quite a bit, about my concerns for the physical well-being of the collection and also about the accessibility and reach of this wealth of data. The concerns being, of course, that it's practically inaccessible while it sits in the archive, and each time someone requests access to or a copy of a report, the collection deteriorates a little. So the solution would be to digitise the collection and make it available on our open access repository OR. And as Maurice looked interested, I pushed the idea a little bit further and suggested that we could additionally make an exhibition website for the collection. Maurice was hooked on the idea and we struck a deal that if he could acquire the funding, the library would lead the project. Spoiler alert here, but thankfully Maurice was indeed successful. I'm going to play you a short 3-minute video now on our project. Welcome to our interactive marine archive.
Here at the Marine Institute, our fisheries history and heritage is very important to us. Our library holds a wealth of historic archive materials of special marine value.
So in a collaboration between our library and our Fisheries department, we acquired some EMFF funding, which is the European Maritime Fisheries Fund. And that funding was to digitise these reports and make them freely available online. Those digitised reports are now available on our open access repository, and that makes them available and accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world, for free.
One particular collection, the Sea and Inland Fisheries reports ranging from 1852 to 1987, are reports on the fisheries activities of those years. This means that at the Institute, we now have an annual report for almost every year from now back to 1852.
The marine environment in Ireland is under unprecedented pressure with pollution, fishing, not to mention climate change. And in order for us to give the appropriate advice to government and to have confidence in the advice we give, we need to begin our journey of discovery at the appropriate starting point. And it's because of that we've come here to the Marine Institute Library to plunder the archive of data going back as far as 1883 to understand where we have got to and where we're coming from. We can identify what the starting point was in terms of the marine environment in the pre-industrial era.
We've also created an interactive marine archive on our website, and this is for both the researcher and the interested public to access that data. And what you'll find there is we've a lovely 120-year timeline, and on that timeline you'll find a little snippet from each of those reports. We have a nice oyster bed map which gives historical pinpoint data of where those oyster beds could be found around Ireland. You'll also find some biographical pieces on the leading scientists of the day, and we have some information on our research vessels available as well.
The importance of our archive cannot be underestimated. We're trying today to give advice on fish stocks in relation to climate change and fishing mortality. And climate change and fishing mortality already were studied 100 years ago. All this has happened before. And having access to this information in our archive allows us now to give better predictions and more credible advice to government going forward.
We're really delighted now to make this collection openly available to the world through our interactive marine archive.
In that video, you've seen some of the original reports, the source material, and the finished interactive marine archive. So, how did we get from these historical physical books to that nice-looking website? Well, we have to go back to the raw material. We first assessed the collection and discovered that the series, confusingly, had a name change many times. This is due to the fact that the series spans around 150 years. We've settled on calling the two separate time series either the scientific reports or the scientific investigations. So what data are in the sea and inland fisheries reports? I'll bring you through a couple of the decades here just to get a flavour. So in 1894, we have fisheries data for fish landed, mackerel, herring, lobster, crab, shrimp and salmon. We also have data for when and who was fishing, where it was taking place, for how long, and the boats they were doing it in, as well as boundaries of where people were allowed to fish. We also know the kind of fishing that was happening, dredging, longline fishing, otter or beam trawling, for instance, and the various bylaws that were in place at the time. So these reports are giving us great data of the when, the where, the what, the why, and how of our historical fishing records and the economic value that went behind it all. And this is consistent throughout all the years, more or less, as you can see here in 1920, moving on to 1950. And as the series ends in 1986, the contents are still fairly similar, although a little bit better laid out. Rather understandably, the data that reoccur over these reports are the exports that Ireland would have mainly traded in at the time. So this is a fantastic resource for the Marine Institute and indeed the world. Now it's available on our open access repository, and here's a link to that, or .marine.ie. In our scientific investigation series, each book contains a compilation of scientific studies from the year. And all of the scientific studies in the series stand alone. So if you get a year where they publish 16 volumes, it's like reading 16 different scientific papers, each with completely different topics. All of the items are processed after digitization using OCR, which is optical character recognition, and this, of course, makes the PDF searchable. And we used Abby Fine Reader 15 to do this. We scanned everything from a desk at the back of the library using a small Fujitsu Scan Snap overhead book scan. Extracting the data for our visualization was a manual process, I'm afraid. For this timeline, we used a software called NightLab. We chose one significant event for each of the 120 years and added it to a formatted Google spreadsheet, which NightLab ingests, and then we can put it on our website. For our habitat map, again, each volume of the reports were examined and the information was manually extracted for each year and placed onto a spreadsheet which our application development team at the Marine Institute turned into this beautiful map. And it's interactive. The historical data was extracted in the same way. However, thankfully, this has previously been compiled by Maurice, so the Excel sheet just needed to be formatted, and the team once again were able to create these nice charts. For our scientific profiles, we chose the most published and renowned scientists of the time and wrote a little snippet about each. And it was the same for the vessels. Our intern CEO, Michael Galuli, had written an article on their history a few years back, and we were able to use that. That's a very quick overview of the project. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to me or Maurice at the email address here. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference. Goodbye.